about the matrilineal society that exists. And I must say, I was extremely struck by what I found, because things like marriage, divorce, sexuality, children, paternity were so liberal. I don't know if liberal is the right word, but yeah, we're so different that even today, I think even people here in Britain would be like, whoa, I think that's going a little too far. So what used to happen? Men and women both could marry as many, there were no limitations. Society did not place restrictions on sexuality. A large structure was tribal, with mother right prevailing. So it was a matrilineal society, i.e. the name of the mother goes to the child, the property, everything is owned by the tribe, it's communally owned, and the children of the woman belong to the woman. They do not belong to the husband. They never live with the husband's family. It's called a verilocal marriage, where basically all the children live with the mother and the husband visits her. And actually, this is something that Muslims will have, Islamic historians of that period have completely excluded, is that the Prophet's own parents had that form of marriage. His mother never lived with the Quraysh. His mother lived with his own tribe. His father used to visit him. Also, up until her death, he lived with her and carried the last name of that tribe. And there's actually an ayah in the Quran, I believe, somewhere about that, because some people used to make fun of that. Because now Quraysh was, Makkah was a trading city. So they were the ones who used to go and interact with the outer world, which was largely countries which were extremely patriarchal, and they were bringing back, certain values from there, and then the ideas of private property ownership as they were getting rich because of trade. However, the largest part of Arabia, which was, mostly Bedouin as they're called, which is, going from place to place to find in the desert. So they were largely matrilineal. Even like Medina, the second center of Islam, which became the ultimate center of Islam, was all matrilineal. There's a hadith in Bukhari. Bukhari is the most authentic book of hadith. Now there's a hadith in the Bukhari where Umar, the second caliph, complains to the Prophet that we used to dominate, and I'm quoting here, we used to dominate our women. However, the people here are dominated by their women, and our women are taking on those ideas. And he actually complained to him about that. There was very little intermarriage between them, because the women here, even though they had converted to Islam, couldn't really deal with the polygamy thing, because actually in Medina and in a larger part of Saudi Arabia, it was more common for women to have multiple husbands than for husbands to have multiple wives. This was, of course, quite interesting, because the idea was that it's the offspring that's valuable, because a tribe is only as powerful as the number of people it has. So there was that. Now let's talk about paternity. Paternity under Islam has become the sole ownership of the father. So the father owns the child. The father has all the rights to the child, and the mother actually does not have rights to the child beyond for what the child depends on her. So if, for example, parents split up, a Sharia court has to give custody to the father. Now, unless the child needs the mother, is dependent on the mother. So there are different interpretations of that. Some people say, well, the child only depends on the mother until he's suckling on her breast. Some people say that, until, a boy is 7 and a girl is 12, that's what happens in Pakistan, so on and so forth. There are different interpretations. But basically, in the end, the child goes to the father. The mother has no right on the child, except for demanding his respect or her respect. There's that. Whereas in the Jahiliyyah time, the woman who would have multiple husbands, once she would give birth, would actually call all of them and say to them, point to a man and say, you are the father, and the man had no right to deny that. He would be the father. He would perform the role of the father. Being a father was not about genetics. It was not about passing on your DNA to the baby. It was about, being that figure, having that connection with someone. So when a woman would marry another man, all her children from the previous marriages would actually become his offspring. They would call him father, and he would act as their father. And I mean, I have so many different quotations and references here, and I can provide all of them, but due to, I think, generally a lack of time, I'm not going to go into a lot. But I will quote one thing. Ibn Battuta in the 14th century writes this, and he's somebody who's a Muslim, that women of Zebed were perfectly ready to marry strangers. If the husband would depart, his wife could not be induced to accompany him. Moreover, any children from the marriage would belong to her. I have countless scholars over here, I think more than 20, who have done this type of research and have come up with these various things. Also, another thing which is very interesting to do with sexuality is the idea of war. Now, when war would happen or trade would happen, people would go away for ages, years and years and years. Now, the husband actually, if it was if it was like just one husband and one wife, or basically what you would call, there was this provision which was a contract. So all marriage is based on contract. So a man and a woman could contract to be monogamous to each other, essentially, which goes completely contrary to what Islamic apologist claims regarding, you know, the multiplicity of marriage. I mean, if that Islam put a limit to that, but no, I mean, a woman and a man could choose to do so if they wanted to. So then, if that husband was going away on war or trade, he was able to tell, you know, basically say to his wife or one of his friends to take care of her, and that would involve sexually if she wanted. So the idea that sex is this holy thing that only belongs to the husband didn't exist. Sometimes the husband would ask the wife to, you know, if he wanted if he considered his genetics to be inferior and he wanted a child who was really powerful or beautiful, he would actually, you know, say, what do you think about that guy? And that would also happen. And then that child would then be that husband's. I mean, which is so revolutionary. I mean, here people would not be okay with that, but people over there were. Now, one other thing that I would want to talk about is the tolerance of that society. And that I'm going to quote from what most Muslims also know, which is studied by them, is the idea to do with, you know, the beginning when the Prophet started preaching. Now, when that happened, it was, I'm going to quote Ibn Ishaq, who says that when the apostle openly displayed Islam as God ordered him, his people did not withdraw or turn against him, so far as I have heard, until he spoke disparagingly of their gods. The offer of leave us alone and we will leave him alone, let him have his religion and we will have ours. As Margaret quotes it, this was what was made to him. It was said to him that stop disparaging our gods and we will let you exist with, you know, your beliefs and people who won't choose to be with you. And he said that if you put the sun in one hand and the moon in the other, I will still continue to preach in the way that I see fit. And then, I mean, Abu Talib, his uncle, who never believed in his faith, still protected him because of ties of the clan. I mean, that's very illustrative of, you know, their perception of how society would operate. And also an example is that monotheistic religion already existed. They were called Hanifs, who had already apostatized from the existing practices and said that no, we only believe in one God, and there were no repercussions against them. The only thing that Arabs were actually unhappy about from the Prophet and his followers were that they were saying that their gods are lies and that their gods are barbaric and that their practices are savage. Basically, that's where the dispute was. And that's so telling. I mean, it's so like, and this little anecdote that I've mentioned is actually something that we study in Islamic history books as well, but we just never look at it that way because that's not the context it's given to us in. Right. And briefly, women don't have a right to divorce in Islam. Women also are you know, can only be half witnesses. And against all of this, and the problem that I posed about Islam, the crisis of Islam as not being willing to evolve in any manner, is blasphemy. So if you say anything against Islam, you will be killed. And that again is something that has not been universally upheld during time and history of Islamic cultures. A lot of Islamic scholars have actually said no. However, you know, the Wahhabi version of Islam, which is Saudi Arabian, spreading like fire everywhere because, I mean, our books, like Pakistan is based on the Sufi version of Islam, which is much more tolerant and kind of like, oh, who cares about the book and who cares about the hadiths? Basically, just be one with God and, you know, have fun and dance and sing, basically. So that's the local sort of version of Islam, which was decried as you know, an aberration. And now our schools actually teach us the Saudi version of Islam. But anyways, that being said, I think I will conclude, and if there's anything that anybody wants me to illustrate or go into details with, feel free to ask.